Welcome to The Verdict. Tom Feher is an award-winning trial lawyer who knows there is more to our stories than what you see on the surface. He has built his law firm, Feher Law, into one of the top injury and employment trial firms representing people in California. Join us each week as Tom explores the successes, challenges, and lessons learned from some incredible people. Hit subscribe, follow Feher Law on Facebook and Instagram, and let's get to the verdict. And now, here is your host, Tom Feher.
Today, I welcome two guests, Brian Breiter and Joseph Limbaugh, to The Verdict. They have a partnership that merges the worlds of improvisational acting and practicing law. Brian Breiter, as many of you may know, is the man behind the law offices of Brian Breiter, a trial firm that concentrates on catastrophic injuries in both California and Florida. Brian has been recognized by his peers in both California and Florida as an outstanding lawyer and a super lawyer. He's known for his unique style in the courtroom, and he has also taught classes throughout the country on improv in trial. Joseph Limbaugh has taught over 30 years improvisational acting and theater. He's one of the original founders of Dad's Garage Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, and was the improv director there for 4 years. He taught professionally at the New York Film Academy and was the head of the improv school and sketch program at the ACME Comedy Theater in Los Angeles. You may have seen his lovely face in various television programs such as Curb Your Enthusiasm, Scrubs, That 70s Shows, Desperate Housewives, and many others. Together, Brian and Joseph have created workshops teaching improvisational theater techniques to lawyers. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
What an introduction.
Yeah. I didn't know I was so acclaimed.
That's usually how I feel after an introduction by somebody else. Really? Did I do those things?
When it's all laid out in front of you, it's like, I guess I'm either old or acclaimed. Maybe both.
Yeah.
Imagine, having to read your entire discography or your resume. We'd be here all day, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, now I know how, Paul McCartney and the Beatles feel.
You know exactly how they feel. Just exactly how they feel. Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much for having us.
Of course, my pleasure. It's
we're huge fans of yours.
Well, it's reciprocated. I love what you guys are doing. And Brian, I have to ask, which is it really? Is it Brian the actor or Brian the trial lawyer? What are you?
I'm just me. It's if I were going to ask you, do you leave Tom Feher outside the courtroom when you walk in?
I think there are different versions, right? Depending on the audience, and there is a certain persona, right? It's like putting on an outfit, whether you're wearing a suit or my normal go-to black t-shirts.
Listen, you're right. It really comes down to the audience, the judge, what's going on in the news. You have to adjust. It's reading the room.
Yeah. Brian, I'm always curious, how is it that you got into improvisational theater and acting before practicing law?
Yeah. I was a kid actor growing up. I was doing commercials and stuff as a kid, and I was in an arts program through the public school, actually, where they plucked out kids from different schools and they brought us to a magnet school where we learned acting. And then when I got older and was in law school, I made the connection. Once I was in, trial advocacy, wow, I really need to start focusing back on the acting aspect of this if I'm going to be doing jury trials, which is exactly what I want to do. I got heavily into improvisational theater, and then I fell in love with improv. And then I got into the Actors Union and started doing actors equity and SAG and AFTRA projects. And then I got serious, moved out here, and the rest is history.
It's interesting, having that sort of theater background and acting background start to come into play while you're in trial advocacy. And for me, I was always an athlete, and I would think I was the only athlete or football player in high school that joined the theater group and the improv group in high school. And so I've always had a love and appreciation for what those things can do, the skill sets that we've learned, or that I've learned in theater and acting, and how that can play a role in trial.
You know, I wish we had improv when I was growing up in high school. They didn't. And my daughter, who goes to Windward School, has an amazing improv program, and she's been doing it for the last 4 years. So to start really early is great. I mean, it's just like getting your 10,000 hours doing anything. You become great at it the more you do it.
Yeah. And I think the earlier on that you do it and get exposure to it really helps set that foundation.
Oh, absolutely. And then I met this guy, Joseph Limbaugh, in 2000, I think.
Yeah, it's like 2000, 2001.
And we've been doing hundreds, if not more, thousands of shows over the years together. And then we started, putting this program together years ago.
Yeah.
15 years.
How did you two guys meet?
It was at the ACME. What was the specific show that where we met each other? Like it was it sketch? It was sketch first.
It was
of all.
sketch first.
Yeah.
The theater program we had an improv group and a sketch group. I was doing both. And I think Joseph came in as sketch early and then became the director of one of the programs.
Yeah, they brought me in as the improv director. But I was still in the sketch program when that happened. So you and I were in the sketch program together, kind of going up, like writing sketches. But like for me, writing comedic sketches, there's a lot of improv based stuff in that. Improv makes writing much easier. Like it really helps with writing. I think writers put a lot of pressure on themselves to make everything really perfect. And improv takes that pressure off. It allows you to write stuff that's not good, so that you can rewrite it to make it good later, which to me is the important part.
And the great thing is Joseph was so great as a director and a teacher. I became friends, and we started doing all these shows together. And that's when I had started that program with Jeff Krivis over at Pepperdine with that improvisational mediation. And we started bringing Joseph in to guest teach with us. And that's where, Improv for Trial was born.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about improvisation and mediation? Because when I think about mediation, I'm like, we're just haggling over numbers here, and you're just yelling at the mediator, go back in the other room and tell him to give us a better offer. I'm tired of this nonsense.
But that's not really what's going on.
True, but there is always this idea that's what's going on, or maybe some people that haven't mediated a lot of cases, or even for clients, right? How does improv?
Well, here's how it started. It wasn't really for the lawyers or the clients first when we created this concept with Jeff Krivis and I, it was for the mediators, because they would go into the rooms and have to interact with these groups, and there might be multiple people in one room. You have multiple defendants, multiple claims people, lawyers in one room. Then you go into another room, you have family members. You don't know who's really calling the shots. And we needed to teach these mediators how to adjust, because a mediator is going to behave very differently in a room with, decision makers from an insurance company or self-insured money from a company versus when they're talking to parents of a kid who's hurt, or, a husband who's lost his wife, or somebody who's paralyzed. So just teaching the mediator how to read the room, how to act, and something that Joseph and I teach called status. But Joseph, your memories of when we were first teaching mediation, I'll get your insights on that.
Yeah, one of my favorite improvisers, Rebecca Northern, she does a show called Blind Date, not the TV show, but it's a staged show where it's just her. She plays a character called Fifi. She gets an audience member up, and the two of them, her and this audience member, do a full-length show for an hour and a half with an intermission, just her and this audience member. So the skills that you need to be able to kind of get someone out of their shell, to diffuse the situation, to get them comfortable to be a performer when they're not a performer, right? Those are the same skills you need in mediation to be able to go in. You have to diffuse a situation. You have to get those people comfortable so they can meet in the middle. It's all kind of the same skill set. And it involves really paying attention to that person, focusing on them, accepting the information they're giving you and acknowledging it. You can't like shut it down. You got to find that middle ground, right?
And when the lawyer is yelling, go in that room and get me some money, dealing with that noise at the same time, or when, they go back in the other room and they're like, guy from the insurance company's chomping on a cigar, and
they always have a cigar. Always a cigar. It's the penguin. The penguin is the guy.
Yeah,
The insurance company.
They're not gonna have our money.
That's right. That's all fake. We got video to prove it. But yeah, so I mean, as far as the mediation, it was a beautiful and natural transition from mediation then to trial, because I started using these techniques and coming up with them, how to use them in signing up a client, depositions, just dealing with your own staff in some ways, managing the case, and then getting the case to a trial, of course, is a completely different quote show that's going on.
Yeah. And Joseph, when you were talking about just this blind date scenario, I couldn't help but think about, these are qualities that are leadership qualities too. Like, how do you get folks to buy into something, or how do you get somebody to meet you, like you said, halfway, and somebody who's not a performer, who's like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I've never acted before. And yet an entire show is put on with this person, and just the amount of attention, we say listening skills, right? But listening isn't just hearing, right? It's also observing, and like everything, the body language, the tonality, how someone's moving, all of those things.
And I
When
think
they're not speaking, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just go ahead.
It's also anticipating. Like if someone says something, you can pretty much, like, if you are really good at these skills, you know kind of what the subtext is and what the next thing they're going to say is. You know what I mean? So yeah, what were you saying, Brian?
No, I was going to say a lot of the loudest information in the room sometimes is somebody not speaking, and just their body language and their reactions to way other people are giving information. I mean, sometimes you have a husband and a wife in the room, maybe the wife's the client, and she's looking at the husband in the mediation room or during the deposition trial. I mean, there's a lot. Who's the communicator? Who's calling the shots? It's just being aware and opening your field of vision and understanding all the information that's coming in. That's listening. It's not just waiting for somebody to shut up and listening to what they're saying. It's really observing everything, even from the moment Joseph gives the example. If somebody drops something in the courtroom, I mean, you have to acknowledge everything that's happening.
Because the jury's there. They're like an audience. They basically are an audience. And an audience is sitting and observing. That's all they're doing, and they will see everything. So you also have to see everything while you're performing, while you're, giving your closing statement or your opening statement, or you're, doing a cross-examination, whatever you're doing, you're performing, but you also want to be as observant as the jury is, because they will notice someone across the room who's snickering.
Tom, don't you have a spotter when you're doing your voir dire?
Yeah, actually, it's something I tell everybody. I'm like, don't ever pick a jury, when you're doing voir dire alone, because I don't even know how anyone could. It's so hard to be able to see and hear everything. I mean, I'll just give you one example. My first trial ever, I was 28, and Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses was on my jury panel. And apparently every time I turned my back, he was giving me the middle finger. But I wouldn't have known that had I not had a spotter.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so good.
That's an awesome story.
So I actually kept him as an alternate.
That's great. Well, that is an example of, if you're not, you don't have eyes in the back of your head, you need someone there, watching for you when you're looking one direction, what's going on over here, because that whole courtroom is the stage and the jurors are part of the performance. And so you need to be incorporating them at every moment that you can.
I want to actually touch on something, because we are talking about theater and using, terms of art that are used in theater, like you just said, stage. And there are some people that may have a misconception that, oh, what are we doing here? Are we just acting? Is that what it is? And you know, I've obviously, I can appreciate the difference. And when we're in court, we are there, we're truth seekers, and we're there to reveal the truth. So can you just tell our listeners, wait a minute, this is not just, we're not just play acting here. How is it that these improvisational techniques and tools actually are tools for the truth?
So I'll let Joseph start, because I mean, Joseph teaches the fundamental improv, and I translated how we use it at trial. And I'm sure he'll tell you exactly what I'm thinking right now, and then I'll incorporate it. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, for me, there's like, I have two big points in this. We do hear that sometimes, like, I don't want to be fake. I'm not here to learn how to be fake. And I agree with you. I don't want you to be fake. I want you to be more real. I want you to be a better version of yourself, you know, to be a more honest version of yourself. That's what I want lawyers to be. I want them to be better at their jobs. And I, you know, I always tell every class, I was on jury duty, and the two lawyers got up, and one of them got up and talked to us, and he was, you know, just explained everything. He was very calm. The second guy got up and would not look us in the eye. He was sweating. He was stuttering. Just the most classic case of stage fright I've ever seen in my life. I didn't end up on that jury, but I was like, that guy's going to lose, you know? And I feel like you go to law school, it's amazing that you're able to learn all of this the complicated intricacies of the law. It's a very hard journey. But you can come out of the end of that and not be able to communicate with people. You know what I mean? You're not taught to express yourself. So for me, it's like, yes, prepare your trial, obviously get all that stuff, know it, but then it's like, you need to be able to connect with people and get that information to them in an impactful way. And that is, you know, that is one of the things. And then the other thing I just want to say really quick is you can have a very incorrect idea of how you come over to people. This is very common for a lot of people. You know, you might think you're a very compassionate, and you might be in your actions, a very compassionate, gentle soul, very friendly. You love everybody, but then you talk to people and they're like, oh, you're real harsh. I'm scared of you. I'm intimidated by you. So knowing what you are portraying to people and being able to, you know, adjust that to who you really are, I think is important. You know, it's just, it lets people know who you are. So
I'll thank you, Joseph. That was exactly what I was thinking. I'll say a very actory thing. When you are there, and after, you know, all the years of doing and practicing this and learning these skills, you're not acting. You're reacting. You are literally in the moment and reacting to the information in the most honest, truthful, grounded way. Are there times where you might reach into your little bag of tricks and use a technique? Sure. We do those things in cross-examination, or the way we speak, or the way we repeat phrases, even the way we turn our back to a witness and walk away sometimes. But when you're really connecting with people, that's, Tom, you know this, when you're talking, you know, when you're talking to a jury, when you're like, damn, I'm connected. And you also know when you're like avoiding the hunter's scope as they're trying to shoot you while you're up there. So you're not acting. You have to really be real and in the moment. So what we're teaching is being real and being genuine and being connected and knowing how you come across and how others see you. Because if you can't appreciate that, it's very, very dangerous. And you know, I've told this story before. I won a trial and got a great verdict. And after we come out, we're in the hallway and the jurors are there and the defense and I are there. And they're like, can you guys give us some constructive criticism? And they're like, sure, are you sure you want to take it? And we're like, yeah, sure, we'd love it. So they go to the defense, going, you were unprepared. And to me, they go, you were arrogant. And I felt so bad in that moment because I didn't want to be seen as arrogant. And then I think, well, maybe the verdict would have been better. And I don't want to be arrogant. I want to be genuine. I want to be nice. I want to be caring. And after that, I was really careful about how I came across. And since then, I've really made an effort of being connected, being more grounded, because they were seeing me as this, you know, arrogant plaintiff's attorney, even though we won.
Yeah. It's true, and it goes back to something Joseph was talking about, which is this idea of how perfection can get in the way of things. And a lot of us trial lawyers, or really anybody in life, right, we prepare for something that's important. And in a trial, to us, it, for me at least, is the most important thing ever, because I have somebody's life in my hands, and what I do may or may not affect their life and the decision that these jurors from the community make. And so there's all of this pressure to do everything perfectly. And you may have a lawyer who perfectly prepares and has their script and is ready to go and reads their script, or rehearses it and says everything perfectly as they rehearsed it. And yet it does nothing for the trial. There's no connecting. It doesn't land. And even though that may have been done perfectly, had, and they think they did a great job, they actually ended up doing a terrible job, and would have been much better just being in the moment and being present and accepting what they were receiving from the moment and from jurors.
Throw this into the mix. You're doing that great presentation, all practice and polish and everything, and the client is there and the client's wife is in the back having a panic attack. And she's your next witness, and you're completely oblivious to that.
Yeah, there's a video that we send out to all of our students, because I was trained by Keith Johnstone. There's like different schools of improvisation, and Johnstone is the guy who kind of taught me the skills that I teach, because he's very focused on narrative and connecting with people. He taught Rebecca Northern, the actress I was talking about before. He's very old now, but he's not, so probably won't be with us much longer. But he has Improv for Storytellers. That's his book. Yeah, he has a TED Talk called, and the name of it is "Don't Do Your Best." Don't do your best is the name of the TED Talk. And his whole point is, if you're trying to do your best, you will fail, because you can't do your best. You be you. Just, if you put that pressure on yourself, then you're not going to succeed. And he talks about, professional athletes. I think there's a book called Peak Performance, where it's interviews with professional athletes who broke records, and most of them, they would interview them and they'd say, like, how did you do this, or how are you feeling? And they'd be like, I wasn't really thinking about it. I was thinking about something else. I wasn't feeling well that day. I wasn't trying to beat a record or anything. So, this idea that we put this pressure on ourselves really impedes our performance, So the preparation is important, obviously, but then you have to be able to put that aside and be in the moment and pivot to what's happening, so that's the skill.
Yeah. And another thing is, you can know the story or the information. Let me say that differently. You can know all the facts of your case inside and out, the science, what you need to prove, etc. But there are so few people that can tell a compelling story, and how to structure a story based on the audience feedback they're getting in the moment. What we teach is when it's appropriate, when it's the most powerful, to inject information, big information, small information, how to best use, audience members to heighten the information that you have, or back down from it when it's too much at that moment. Sometimes the audience is not ready for stuff that you desperately want to give them, and it could have a horrible backfire. I mean, we had a case recently where it settled right after opening statements. And Sean Kim, who tried the case with me, I told him, he's like, I want to show the horrible photos in the opening. I said, absolutely not. No way is this jury ready for those photos. And you need to tell them that in the opening. I have some photos, but you can't see them now. You're not ready for it. They're just that bad. Later, you'll get to see them when the time is right. And when the mood is right, you'll get to see those. It made them want to see those photos so much more. And it would have just a much better impact. The case settled after the opening. The jury hung around. We talked to them. They all wanted to see the photos. And then we were like, nah, you really can't see them. No, we showed them, but it's just learning how to tell a story, when to tell a story, and having those storyteller instincts that, I'm just being very frank, 99% of people don't know how to do it.
Yeah, we all talk about story and we all love story as human beings. Stories are very impactful to us, but being a storyteller is a difficult skill to learn. You know, it takes time.
Yeah. Well, you know, the skill set that you're talking about, I mean, to me, it's also like a life skill, right? And there's, you know, if you go on a first date and you happen to be head over heels for the person you're with, if you tell them you want to marry them on that first date, you may have just lost that opportunity. Or if you're the person that, you know, may reveal too much information. Well,
Save
yeah, I've
that
been
for
in,
week 6.
yeah, I've been in therapy for 10 years. Probably not the time that someone's going to accept that information. And you know, someone once told me, you know, it's not enough to love somebody unless you love them in a way that they can receive it. And I sort of, that's stuck with me for a long time, but it's also, I've just translated that to communication as well. And, you know, your audience, there's a time and place when they're going to be more receptive or even receptive to whatever you're giving them.
You know, again, it's like any athlete, and I've heard you say this, it's working out. You got to work out these muscles. You got to practice them. They atrophy if you don't use it. I mean, Joseph and I are in class every week, sometimes 2 times a week doing this. And so when I'm walking, I did 11 trials since last January. Sorry,
Wow.
last July until now, I did 11 trials. And only because during the pandemic period, we were doing so many classes, I was like, boom, let's go. And I felt probably the most creative I had ever felt in the last year because I was doing all this improv all the time. And my, you know, attorneys at my office too were all there with me because I was having them do the same programs. It really does make a huge difference when you can, at a moment's notice, pull these exercises or techniques right out of your bag and throw them up there and start using.
Yeah, yeah. And the irony, well, if you call it irony, is that this idea of being prepared or doing your best, you end up not being prepared or not doing your best. And then, you know, focusing on improv or these skills allows you to actually be more in the moment and more present and more able to connect on a very human and genuine level.
I've talked to you about this. You and I get cases referred to us by lawyers, sometimes days before the trial, right?
Yeah.
We haven't lived with the case for 3 years, so we don't know every single fact like we would if it was our own baby that we had raised. But you know how to tell a story. And you know how to perform in front of a jury because you're great at what you do. And so that alone elevates your chances of getting a great result. And some of the cases that we've done best on are the ones that we just got right before the trial. Because we're like, okay, what's this about? You know, what's the story? Instead of what's the science, what's the causation, what's the fucking story here? How do we get immediately connected? We need something to connect. What is it? And you can be creative with that. I know you've done it. You've told me about, and I've seen your results doing this.
Yeah. Well, it forces, you're forced to hyper focus. And I almost love that because, you know, we can, enough platitudes, but, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. But when you're hyper focused and you really try to distill something to its simplest form, that's the beginning of a great story, right? And a real story, and getting to the real root of it, and, you know, getting rid of all that minutia. And how many, I always think about when people are telling me some new information, how much of it am I actually retaining? And how many times do I feel overwhelmed? It's like, you know, drinking from a fire hose, right? And people aren't going to remember all the facts and everything that you're saying, right? Like, these are 12 people that are hearing this story for the first time. Give them something that they can, you know, latch onto that resonates with them.
Joseph makes a great analogy to stand-up comedians during their set that they do on a show. Joseph, you know what I'm
Oh yeah, well, I mean, if you're a stand-up comedian, like a professional stand-up comedian, if you watch someone who has an hour of material, when they perform for like an hour, they will generally about halfway through stop telling a bunch of jokes and get real for a moment, and, you know, and then come back to the jokes. And there's a reason for that. Human beings cannot laugh consistently for an hour, we will harm ourselves. Like you can't just, you can't just laugh. You need to have a break in there. You need to have a rest, so we can get back to the funny stuff, and that's how a story is. The rests are important as the notes. As Brian said, the silences can speak a lot. So you need to be able to know when to kind of let that anticipation build. We're not going to show you these photos now, or just knowing what the natural anticipation of what comes next is for the people who were observing. It might not be what you have prepared, and so you might have to pivot and go, oh, the jury is expecting this next, and this would be more impactful. I mean, you wouldn't do that all the time, but sometimes being able to shift like that can, change the whole course of the case, right?
And sometimes you're forced to do things. The judge says, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting 45 minutes for your witness to show up. Put on your next one. And, some people have a certain order that they want to put their case on. Or sometimes the defense will be like, I'm sorry, I have to put my witness in out of order. And sometimes, you have to do that to accommodate defense, or just to score points with the judge, or just you're being forced to do it. And that throws off your story and the timing and the pacing and the heartbeat of the story. And so just being able to do that,
it's the essence of improvisation, really, is adapting. It's improvisation is risky theater. That's what it is. It's more like a sport, right? You don't have a script, you're making it up. The audience knows you're making it up. And so the ability to pivot when something goes wrong, that is the whole skill of improvisation, or a large part of it. If you're at an improvised performance and the set collapses, that's going to be the best part, as the improvisers justify it. But if that was a scripted show, it would ruin the show. Everyone would have to leave and come back tomorrow, right? So, yeah.
Think about you're walking on stage on a tightrope above a pit of crocodiles. That's fun. And you have to be really in that moment to feel it, understand it, and convey what you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next thing that Joseph and I are doing. We teach improv for trial, which is teaching improv to lawyers and to use those improv skills in trial specifically. It's different than just going like to Groundlings or Second City and taking an improv class. It is completely different than that. You're learning basic rules of improv, yes, but what you're learning them for is the specific arena of being in the courtroom and using those skills for voir dire, for cross-examination, direct, opening, and of course, closing.
Yeah.
And then we have another class that we're starting to teach now, because we built a theater at the office here that has a courtroom inside it, and we're doing improvised trials. It's different than a focus group, because in a focus group, you know what you're going to do. One guy's going to play defense, one guy's going to play plaintiff side, and you really are going to maybe focus one element or three elements of your case in front of a jury and then see how they react. What we're doing is we're having real jurors come in. We have other actors play witnesses, or real witnesses come in, client, or we have video, or an actual expert comes into the space. And then we have improvised scenarios. And you said it exactly, Tom. MIL granted, MIL denied. Do it both ways. Witness doesn't show up. This information happens. Bombshell, impeachment evidence that you weren't expecting comes in. How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
Because that affects the focus too.
These so the classes that you two are teaching, I mean, what's sort of it seems like there's two things going on. One, you have the improv trial, the actually improvisational trial that you can put on, and then there are also the classes as well. So are those two separate things that you're doing?
Yeah, so Joseph and I teach the improv for trial, which is first, before you can go doing an improvised trial, you really need to learn the rules of improv and how to use them in a trial. And that's either we do those in person, which we prefer, those are nice to do, or we do them over Zoom, which have been amazing. That's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And I'll let Joseph talk to you a little bit about that. After you've learned improv for trial, then you're ready to do the more advanced stuff, which is long form, like a trial, or even if it's just a portion of the trial, like voir dire or closing argument, and learning how to structure storying in a more advanced way. Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what we teach is, once again, there's a lot of different schools of improvisation. They're all valuable, but they do have very different focuses. And, Johnstonian improvisation is focused on narrative and on connecting with people, and status is a big part of it. That's one of the big things that we teach, but it's about human behavior and making people more like actors. Originally, it was making actors more believable and more in the moment and alive, right? Because what is stage fright? It turns you into a robot. You clamp your body down, you become symmetrical, you become boring, and it's fake. We know that it's fake. We're very good at observing people. We know if they're hiding something or they're pretending to be something else. So, what Johnstone wanted to do is to get kind of people out of their head, get them in the moment, and also get them to connect with other people. So, part of that is focusing on the relationship with you and the other person, the status between the two characters, and then also the other thing is narrative. Like, what is a story? How does something become a compelling story? Like, why do you, especially if you're making it up on the spot, like, how do you know what comes next in this story? It's a really big question. And I think a lot of people don't really have a good answer for it. You ask people, what's a story? And they'll go, well, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. It's like, well, a snake has a beginning, middle, and an end. That doesn't tell me anything, But I think Keith, the stuff that he has said, it really has gotten me to the heart of what a story is in a way that I've found satisfying. And I've always wanted to know, like, what's so great about stories? Like, I love stories. And I think he has some really good answers for that. And so it can really help anybody whose part of their job is telling a story,
I found that people after our class, because we record the class and you can go back and watch class 1 versus class 8, and they're like, I can't even watch class 1. I can't even see that person. I'm not that person anymore. Because by the time you're done with your brain has been unlocked, and the matrix has downloaded all of these, techniques into your mind, and they really are transformative. Even the most experienced trial lawyers who have taken our class, because some very experienced trial lawyers have taken it and been like, wow.
Yeah.
I never really approached it that way.
Tom, are you going to ask what is a story? Is that
I was totally, yeah. I want to know what is a story?
I will say, like, this is one definition he gives, I believe, in Improv. He says, set up a hero or heroine and then torture them. That is one. It's a pretty good definition of a story, but yeah, the idea that the hero or the heroine of your story has to go through some sort of pain or suffering, I think is, that's part of it. Like, first of all, we have to care about that character, and then that character has to go through some sort of horrible series of, situations.
And Tom, isn't that every case we do?
Yeah. I was literally, that's it. The hair on my, I was getting goosebumps thinking of it, because the people we represent, to me, everyone is a potential hero, right? And in some context, they are a hero. And, we are lucky that we get to choose who we represent. And, we don't work for an insurance company or a corporation per se, but we choose who we represent, and we see these people that are good human beings, and someone has done something really, really wrong to them. And it not only has someone done something really, really wrong to them, but they continue to do something really, really wrong to them.
During the time you're telling the story, they're still being tortured. That's part of it. And here's the beauty. Who writes the ending to the story?
The jury.
That's right. And so you're preparing them and getting them ready to deliver that ending that your client deserves. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And if they're not there with you, they're not going to give you the ending you want. What did we do wrong? What happened? Why did the jury fuck us like that?
Yeah, that's what I want, is like, I just want all of you to be better at it, because it matters to me. Like, all that stuff you're saying, like, I've been a plaintiff, and I did not like the outcome that I got. I didn't have a good attorney, and I want you to be better than the attorney that I had. I was in my 20s, and I had like a defense attorney who worked for a big insurance company, it was like a friend of a friend got them for me. And you know, without going into it, it's like he did nothing to try to get me any sort of justice. He kind of just observed everything. And I think, you know, I did get a settlement because he was a defense attorney. They were just like, here's some money. And I was like in my 20s, I'm like, all right, but I want you all to be better at what you do. You know what I mean? I want you to be better at it.
Yeah, Tom, there's a story that every case has. It's the story the defense wants you to tell.
And I mean, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that us lawyers that represent people, sometimes we start to fear things that we don't need to fear, and these are things that are put into our minds about cases and how our experience dealing with insurance companies or defense lawyers or adjusters for insurance companies, and how they attack our clients or our cases. And then a lot of us, including myself, you start to think, is this a bad thing about our case? Is this something that's bad for the value of what this person has went through? And just disabusing myself of that. I mean, you say, oh, well, you know, they didn't go to a doctor right away. Well, so what? Some people are hurt and don't go to doctors right away. That's just the reality of it. Or, you know, some people aren't excited about the proposition that they need to have spine surgery. So they may not jump for joy when that's their recommendation after not getting better.
Listen, you know, again, you're hiring the writers to write the ending for your story when you're doing the voir dire. So you're already planting the ending bits and pieces in their minds when you're doing the voir dire. You're setting them up. You're planting those seeds, right? And then throughout the trial, you're watering those seeds and cultivating those ideas. So at the end, they're like, oh, yes, this makes perfect sense. This is where this case needs to go. And so even if they're bad facts, you can, you know, every garden has weeds. And so it's just learning how to deal with them. Do you pluck them, or do you have weeds that you can make look like a flower? I mean, you just have to learn how every element of your story is important and using it to your advantage.
Yeah. I've always been a big proponent of owning everything. I think that sort of transparency is important. And sometimes lawyers will think that something is a bad fact, but it could end up being your best fact, ironically enough, if you are willing to be open, honest, and accept it.
I mean, this sounds crazy, I don't know, but telling a story or a trial is like a piece of art. You know, it's subjective. It depends on who's looking at it and the perspective that they have when they're seeing the story. I mean, yeah, sure, a fact can be very bad, but in the whole or in that moment, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I recently had a trial where there was a lot of stuff about an expert that we happened to retain, and the defense was going to go really hard after this expert. I mean, just everything that you could think about. And the defense attorney did, and was talking about his personal life and the money he makes and all of this stuff. And, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and I was like, I don't think this is really effective, actually. And the jurors after told us, we really did not like what you did to that expert. We really didn't like that you attacked him on all those things. And that was potentially the worst thing. I mean, you know, the worst thing of the case was, you know, how are they going to try to just totally attack this person? And yet it didn't work. It actually backfired.
Yeah. Joseph, I mean, just as a lay person, how do you see, you know, story that's focused on the wrong thing?
Well, I think you don't always have to. I feel like we have this confrontational idea. It's very much in our society, and it shows up in trial as well, where you feel like you have to attack someone, you know, that might not be the best way to discredit them or to use that information. And like you said, stuff happens that might be a really bad fact or something, that you would prefer that the jury doesn't know, right? Ideally. But the thing is, they're there and they have that information and you have to deal with it. And if you deal with it honestly and you accept it, then that gives you more credibility in their eyes. A lot of lawyers are already, from the public's point of view, like they already think you're being fake. We talked about how we don't, this is not about being fake, but the public and probably some of your jurors, even after selection, think you're a big fakeo. So it's like that moment of like integrity and honesty where you're like, yes, this is a bad fact. I'm going to accept it and I'm going to face it head on. That gives you integrity, because we watch what people do and we observe it and we acknowledge it. We know it. What you do says more than what you say.
I mean, one of the most basic rules of improv is saying yes and to good information and bad information. And if you say no or just block past something and try to ignore it, it sometimes stands out even more.
Yeah. The techniques that you guys are teaching lawyers, I mean, is this something that anybody that has any interest, that's a lawyer, even a non-lawyer, I mean, is this something anyone can really learn?
Everyone should learn this. Improv for trial is geared for trial lawyers. Improvisation should be for every human being on this planet.
Yeah, I always say in all of my classes, and it sounds like hyperbole, being better at improvisation makes you a better human being, because improvisation is the art of connection. It's the art of connecting to other people, of connecting ideas, of connecting to who you really are. Like it's huge, and it's transformed me and my ability to communicate with people and to be closer to people and understand them. So I think everybody should learn it, really.
Tom, have you spoken to anyone who's done our class or anyone that's done we were just at Panish and then at Paris Trial College, and I did it up in Montana with Nick, and I've been doing it, and a lot of people have really loved it.
Yeah, I talked to people that were part of your workshop a little over a year ago in downtown LA. I think it was at the Marriott, and I mean, people were just blown away by it. And so people are, I think it's something that is foreign to a lot of trial lawyers. I mean, we watch other trial lawyers, or we go to seminars and hear people talking to us about how to do things, and being engaged and involved and participating in this, I think it's just a whole new, it's a whole new world.
Beautiful.
It's right there. It's right there.
Musical theater.
Right. I definitely didn't have the voice for it. But it's something you start to see, oh my gosh, what could have I done had I known this? How much better of a storyteller or an advocate for the people that I represent could I have been had I known this? And then on top of it, like you mentioned, it's a muscle or whatever analogy you want to use. It's something that you need to continually practice.
It's also great networking. I mean, listen, you're in the room with 10 trial lawyers every week, and not only are you doing these exercises, connecting with them, you're also bouncing ideas off each other and coming up with themes in your cases during the class. I mean, Joseph, we did one where it's a dram shop case in another jurisdiction outside the state of California. And they just didn't know how to talk about how is the bar responsible for the person who walks out of the place drunk and then kills somebody. And, during the improv exercises, we workshopped it and we realized that the bartender is a lifeguard. That's what a bartender is, lifeguard. And they are the gatekeepers of the safety of the people outside. And if you're letting something dangerous into the pool and the lifeguard's not aware or doesn't have that life preserver to throw around that drunk driver and bring them back into the bar, or not let them have their keys, or don't overserve them, they're responsible. They're the life guards outside. And so then the people were like, oh, wow, we're going to develop that theme. And they developed the theme for the case. And that was just from something we were experimenting during the class.
What with these classes, what are some techniques? You talked to, I was just curious about some of the techniques or some of the exercises that you do in these classes to help trial lawyers develop their improvisational skills, or really just to become better humans.
Well, I think Joseph does an exercise. It's one of my least favorite exercises to do, but I'm actually pretty good at it. It's called gibberish, and I'll let Joseph tell you what that means.
Yes, it's one of my favorite. I mean, there's a lot of improv games, and I think of them as games because when you're playing a game, the consequences of failure are very low, right? If you're playing a game, you mess up, you can laugh. But in real life, if you mess up, you have to look miserable, right? If the police pull you over, you can't be like, oh man, I was going fast, right? That will not be a good outcome for you. You have to be like, it was so going so fast. Anyway, so these are games, but the one that Brian's talking about, gibberish, I love to get, especially with lawyers, I give them all scripts that are just gibberish. It's meaningless sounds. And then they have to like talk to each other using this gibberish language that doesn't mean anything. And it's, lawyers are so dependent on their ability to, look locute and like come up with excellent words, that it's for some of them very frustrating, but also for a lot of people, even lawyers, they find it to be freeing, because you realize how much energy you spend on sounding clever or sounding funny or sounding, saying the exact right thing. And if you are just focused on the body language, it's very freeing. It can be very, very fun. And then you realize, oh, there's all this information we're passing to each other without words. And it's, it's a great revelation.
But, listen, Tom, you've been to a foreign country, you don't speak the language, and you have to get directions from somebody. And I love watching two people that don't speak the same language giving directions to each other. There's two completely different languages, and a person observing it completely understands both of them if you're in tune with it. And, gibberish is a way, it's very freeing to learn how to communicate without the safety net of the words and the quips and the, things that we've gotten so used to using.
Yeah. And the programs that you guys are putting on, if somebody wants to sign up to do the improv in trial, and if they want to sign up and start doing this, where are those held? How can they go and sign up for it?
So anyone can do Zoom, anyone across the country. In fact, our last class, we had 2 lawyers from New York City, 2 from Ohio, 2 from Chicago, and 2 from LA in the same class. I think we did that class at 5 o'clock Pacific time on Wednesday nights. When we get enough people in the class, we work out the best time that we're going to do it. We have firms that will hire Joseph and I just to do like a boot camp, 1 or 2 day boot camp for their whole firm. Or the best way is here now at the theater, and I have pictures I can show. Is this?
Yeah, let's see some pictures.
Where we have a theater where you can come and do the classes live. And personally, I think that's the best way to do improv is, live in the room with the people. It just adds a complete different layer of it. I have some video I could show you of what it looks like when it's a courtroom. Let me pull that up. Hold on.
Sorry, I just got a cat in my lap. So
well,
you might have
yes,
got some tail.
Yeah, if you say no to that cat, it's gonna scratch your face off.
No.
That would be a completely different scene. So here's us recently doing an improvised trial. We have a actor who you might recognize as Gene Sullivan playing an accident reconstruction expert. And I have our jurors here. We have 13 jurors. There's defense counsel played by Chance Pardon and myself. And there's a camera that's watching the jury. And so later we can review that and see their expressions, what, worked for them in that moment. And of course, we're showing them multimedia, where we're showing them facts of the case and stuff like that. Let me turn that on. And then the room converts into a theater, and I have to find a most recent photo. Why don't you guys talk while I'm looking for that?
But I was gonna say, what's the most challenging part, Joseph, with working with Brian?
Actually, I find working with Brian very easy. We've worked together for a long time. That's why we're doing this. But
I figured as
yeah.
much. He's an easy guy to get along with.
When I'm not being frenetic and all over the place. Here's some cool pictures of the theater. Well, no, that's not it. I'll find them for you. Keep asking Joseph important questions.
It's more of the moderator here role. One of the things I was curious, I was going to ask you at the outset, but conversation did just start going, was how did you get into theater and acting and sort of all of that versus, I don't know, doing something else? I mean, was there ever something in your mind where like, no, I think I was going to be an investment banker?
I mean, I do have a lot of interests. I'm also a game designer, so this isn't, as an artist, I do whatever hustle works. But I've always, like, ever since I was in grade school, I would write plays for like the kids in grade school. I designed a haunted house when I was in 8th grade for the younger students. Yeah, I've just always kind of been theatrical. I didn't first see improv though until 1990 in Portland, Oregon. I was watching a group called Waggy and Friends. Those are like, that's like the epitome of all improv groups in like the 90s, like Waggy and Friends, Hoopla, Go Dingo. Like they're all like super cheesy, but they were playing theater sports, and which is one of John Stone's formats. And I just was like, I want to do that. And then I, started taking classes with them, and then, went up to the Loose Moose and trained with Keith. And I mean, that was it. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to do this.
And that's something we're going to do, is we're going to do theater sports. We're going to make lawyer teams, and we're going to be doing competitive improv amongst the lawyer teams against each other. Maybe people will even sponsor the teams, like a deposition company or a funding company or a animation company. And then we can have competitive lawyer team versus lawyer team in our theater space, which I'm going to show you a picture right now.
I think you should make the draft part of the theater space.
Oh, absolutely.
The drafting of lawyer teams.
Oh, yes, for sure. So that's the stage. Actually, there's a beautiful black velvet curtain that is being installed today. So there's the stage, and you see that. And then here is the stage perspective looking out. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So there, and you can see in the background, that's our court pieces, which are stored over to the side. And we actually just had about twice as many chairs just put in. So you have room for a full audience to be watching a theater performance be put on. And we have theater lighting, and
I see that.
Office lights that you have on in the room. And then when we're doing classes, we open up the space, and we usually sit in a circle and have people go up on the stage to do the performing, and we do the exercises. And then of course it gets transformed into a theater, into a courtroom when we're doing the improvised trials and stuff. But Joseph, what do you think of live versus Zoom classes, since we've been doing quite a bit of both lately?
Well, when we first started doing the Zoom classes, I was skeptical that, because I've taken some improv classes in Zoom, they all kind of went online during the pandemic. And although they're valuable, there's a limitation to it. But there are things you can do in Zoom that you can't do, in person. And there are things in person that you can't do in Zoom. So they're both valuable. They're just kind of a different skill set. Zoom is definitely a little more, I think, cerebral, a little more. I think it's actually safer for lawyers to do stuff in Zoom. They feel a little safer because that screen's between them. And that's, I thought at first you were going to ask, what's the most challenging thing about teaching lawyers? And I think it's getting them to play. Like, they're very serious people. And the only way I know to teach these skills is you've got to play games. You've got to have a playful attitude. That's the only way I know. I actually think it's the best way to learn anything. If you can turn it into a game, then you're going to learn it faster. But for improv, that's how I was taught it. That's the only way I know to teach it. You've got to play these games, and you've got to approach them like games. You've got to have fun. be open-minded about it. So I think that the screen helps with that for them a little bit.
I can definitely see that. I don't want to look like a fool, or
Yeah.
or this person knows me. The last thing I want to do is look that way, or do that thing. And it's liberating once you cross that threshold.
Yeah, we spend so much energy worrying about what other people think of us. It's kind of sad, really.
There is that saying about, I don't know how it goes, but you worry about all these people and what they think about you, and then as you get older, you realize no one actually ever cared.
They're all worrying about what you think of them, right? So yeah.
That just gave me a great idea for a show, Joseph. Improvised high school reunion.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
sure.
that would be cool.
It's a great idea for a show.
And then you do flashbacks to the high school.
Oh yeah, it's right there. It's like low-hanging fruit. You just pluck it.
Anybody out there that tries to do the show is copyright.
Trademark.
Right now.
Exactly.
Do we have a trademark attorney in the house? Well, you guys, it's been just awesome talking. And
well, you
I feel
asked
like-
about, wait, before you go,
Oh.
you asked if you want to take the classes, just go on improvfortrial.com, improvfortrial.com. You can go on our social media on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff. Improv for Trial, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Sign up
no
for class.
spaces. It's all one word.
And Tom, we'd love to have you come and guest with us in a class, live classroom. I'd love to do, a focus of one of your cases. I could play plaintiff, I could play defense, and I could play a witness. It doesn't matter. And we do a trial together. I think it would be awesome.
Well, I accept the invitation. I think it'd be
Do
awesome.
you do focus groups?
I do focus groups. In fact, I'm doing one at the end of the month, and I've been putting them on myself for years now. And I usually play the defense when I do it. But I think they're really important in just trying to get a better understanding as to how somebody would view your case and different things that they view as important or information that they would want. It's not always it's not, a focus group isn't always going to tell you the value of your case,
Right.
but you do get really key pieces of information. And I'm always focus grouping my case to some extent, right? Talking to my wife or anybody that's not a lawyer. And what do you think about this?
Now drop an improv bomb on that focus group concept. And it blows it up in a completely different way.
It totally does. I don't disagree. And in fact, I'll run multiple focus groups. One where these are where all of the evidence that's not supposed to come in by law comes in, because you happen to have a judge that doesn't really care to follow the law, or just has a different take on it. I mean, there are gray areas, but I run them with different scenarios as well. So I mean, I'm the first to say that the stuff you're doing, I'm not the first, but I will say what you're doing is amazing, and it is so different than what's out there. And I think anybody, like John said, just improv does make you a better person. And I was thinking just overall more empathetic to others. So,
and if I wasn't being a true improviser, I wouldn't bring up the fact that you just called Joseph John.
oh, did I?
Right?
Yeah.
Joseph,
Oh my!
I can't ignore that. You called it.
I heard it.
John.
I was going to let you respond to it, because then I feel weird.
Wow.
If I respond to it. But I knew you would.
I'm gonna
Hey,
I'm gonna blame that on having a 3-week old and not having slept, because now my 3-year-old is deciding that he is going to one up our 3-week-old in terms of how little sleep I can get, because he's deciding to wake up every few hours now for any random thing.
It's funny that you say that. One-upping, one of my favorite improv games.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that is a reasonable excuse, Tom. I accept it.
Yeah, you should hear some of the excuses. There's not enough ice in his water. One of his covers came off. He wants to say "I love you" again. So, that is sweet.
Well, he's what he's using on you, Tom, is status. These are status techniques.
Yeah. How old is he? 3, did you say?
He's 3.
Yeah. There's like certain times when children start to experiment with status. That's the one. From 2 to 3 is one, and then, you know, obviously teenage years. But you know, I don't know. Anyway.
Thank you so much for having us. We had a blast, and you know, we were really excited when you agreed to, you know, have us on your show, and because you get it. That's all.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Joseph/John Limbaugh. You guys were awesome, and it was great to have you on, and look forward to doing some improv with you guys soon.
Yeah, absolutely. When do we get to see this bad boy? Does it go out tomorrow?
There will be some production. We usually drop them every other Thursday, so we can have it up in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, just give us a heads up and we can put it out there into the universe. And
Yes, please promote, and hopefully, you know, we'll have more people doing improv.
and just the fact that we're in the same Zoom room together is awesome. You know how much a fan I am of yours, and so
A lot of mutual respect, and so thank you guys. You guys have been great.